Remember that howsoever you are played, or by whom, your soul is in your keeping alone. Even though those who presume to play you be kings or men of power, when you stand before God, you cannot say, "But I was told by others to do thus," or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice. Remember that.
I will.
Hello fellow creature, welcome back to Rooftop Talks. Today I've got an interesting idea for you. Not a new concept, but perhaps a new application of the concept. You might be familiar with Bentham's mugging, as it's known. Jeremy Bentham's mugging. I want to get into this and how it applies to the topic of this channel. But first let me set the scene a little bit. This is going to get into utilitarianism. That's why we're bringing up Bentham, because Bentham is like the godfather of utilitarianism. And utilitarianism, as you probably know, is one school of thought within ethics, but it's not the only school of thought in ethics. And this is something you got to understand. If you're really into utilitarianism, that's cool. I meet a lot of you guys. I don't ascribe to one ethical system of thinking, okay? I actually move around, and this can be very daunting to someone who stays put in one place. And it's kind of like a rock, paper, scissors thing. If you force yourself to only choose scissors every time, maybe you'll win the first game. Maybe you will. Maybe the person you're going up against draws paper. And maybe you even win a second time because your opponent does paper again. And then your opponent does rock. And they realize that you're playing scissors every time, right? So after a few games of rock, paper, scissors, your opponent is going to choose rock, 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 rock. Okay, that's what's going to happen if you only have one system of thinking for philosophy. This is a difficult thing to take in. I'm sure anything I start this video with is not going to end the discussion, but that's one way of thinking about it. Basically, if I know that you're a utilitarian, I can exploit the weaknesses of utilitarianism in an argument against you. But if I reinforce my ethical viewpoint with deontology, with virtue ethics, and with these other ideas, these other concepts, it's much harder to pin me down. A lot of you guys are utilitarians, and that's fine. I'm helping you here if you're a utilitarian because I'm exposing a vulnerability. It's a good learning experience. Okay, so now let's get into Bentham's mugging. What is it? Let's use the very typical scenario, and hopefully I do it well enough for you guys to understand the concept. Our big boy Bentham is walking down the street in 18th century Britain, whenever it was, and a mugger jumps out from around the corner with a knife. And Bentham, of course, is, oh, he's got a knife. What's he going to do? And instead of pointing the knife at Bentham, he turns the knife on himself. And he says, "Unless you give me $20 right now, I will cut off my own arm." And the mugger goes into a big story, a very convincing, very heartfelt story about how he has nothing to lose, nothing left to live for, and all he wants in the world is to get $20 from Jeremy Bentham. Not from anyone else. He has to get it from Bentham. It's an ideological thing as well as a financial motivation. And he says this very convincingly to the point where Bentham believes wholeheartedly that this mugger in front of him will cut off his arm unless he hands over $20 or 20 quid. I thought it was English. And so Bentham hands over the $20 as a matter of principle, as him acting on his ethical system of utilitarianism. And the next day, the same thing happens again, or he turns around the next alleyway corner and another mugger jumps out and does the same thing, and so on, until Bentham is penniless. But this highlights a problem with the overextension of responsibility inside utilitarian thinking. If you are simply relying on utilitarian ethics, there is an overextension of responsibility. See, not only does Bentham, in this scenario, I'm not saying actual Bentham would, but not only does Bentham take responsibility for how he behaves towards the mugger, but he also extends as far as to take responsibility for how the mugger treats himself. Bentham takes responsibility for that. And that's where we see this vulnerability with utilitarianism. And that vulnerability can be exploited, hence why it's called a vulnerability. Now, you may think that this is just a theory. This is purely theoretical. This could never possibly have any real-world implications. Vegans face a Bentham's mugging all the time. Bentham's mugging is used so commonly to try and disarm vegans. The people who do it are brain-dead, stupid zombies who don't even know the first thing about ethics. But it's kind of like you don't need to understand the internal combustion machine engine inside a car for you to drive a car. In the same way, these people in their triggered state, they reach out instinctively for a way to attack vegans. And what they find is a very rudimentary Bentham's mugging. If you're a vegan, you will have seen this comment before, and it goes something like this. I'll eat a hamburger for every person you turn vegan. Or I'll eat a sirloin steak for every time you upload a video that talks about veganism. If you do that again, I'll go out and buy a pack of bacon. So the person doing this Bentham's mugging is making it so it's like you feel as a vegan, you are actually doing the damage to the animals. It's really fucking dumb. But even if it doesn't work rationally, emotionally, it is a kind of attack. It is an offensive move. It's intended to hurt the vegan. And it doesn't have to be rational, really. It will already do its damage if the vegan is not emotionally as well as logically fortified in their position. It could do damage on a vegan who's not well trained in this kind of thing, not well trained in handling this. And in fact, it's not even the inexperienced vegans that have trouble with this, because, like I said, it is especially difficult for people who are only utilitarians. I'll give you an example. Jack Hancock, who I am subscribed to. I watch Jack Hancock's videos, Humane Hancock. He's very utilitarian. Like, he's very far on the utilitarian spectrum. So he struggles with this one. He has said before in a video, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to find it and pull it up, but this made a big impression on me, so I'm pretty sure I'm not making this up. Someone had presented this scenario to him. It's a version of Bentham's mugging where he said to Hancock, if you eat one beef burger, I will replace 2 beef burgers that I was going to eat with tofu. I just need you to eat 1 beef burger. Okay, so that's the proposal. It was to test his utilitarianism, and Hancock, like a fool, sorry to say, no, scratch that, edit that part out. Hancock said if he thought the person was being honest about this proposal, he would eat the beef burger, which made me facepalm. And of course, I've dealt with this. I've had triggered non-vegan in my comments section saying things like, you want to clap back? That's going to cost you an extra steak. Every time you open your goddamn mouth, I'll buy another steak. That means you're killing cows by being a vegan. The commenter is basically backed into a corner. They realize that they don't have shit on me. They don't have any good answers, so they try emotionally manipulating me instead by essentially holding the cows at ransom. Very pathetic. I can't imagine how they can see themselves as the good guy in this scenario, but that's what they're doing. And of course it's bullshit. They're probably not going to stuff themselves. It would make them even more physically ill. It would just accelerate their way towards getting a heart attack. But to shut someone up, it's like an act of desperation that they've turned to. And of course, my response is to tell them to go fuck themselves. If I need to, I try and actually explain to them what they are doing in their triggered state. I find that helps. Explain exactly the kind of tactics they're doing, and that is quite a good way of disarming them. You can actually say, yes, you're holding the cow's ransom, and it's not going to work on me. You're being emotionally manipulative. I can see straight through it. You name the tactic they are using against you. It's very powerful to diagnose the person. If you're talking to a sociopath, diagnose them. Just be like, you are exhibiting sociopathic behavior. Or in this case, it's not being a sociopath. It's you are in a triggered mental state right now. Your points are incoherent and you have fallen back on emotional manipulation because you don't have anything else. And that can be quite powerful. But anyway, let's get back to the rock, paper, scissors that I talked about at the start of this video. The problem with certain utilitarians is with just that form of moral calculus that they do, it's very easy to allow impulsive behavior into that, to use utilitarianism to justify impulsive behavior, short-term thinking as well, which is what we saw in the burger example with Jack Hancock, not thinking long-term enough. It's another vulnerability, I should say, about utilitarianism. But going back to the rock, paper, scissors thing, as you guys know, I lead with deontology. So a deontologist might say, if I ate the burger, I would be treating that cow whose body that beef patty belonged to, I would not be treating that cow with the same respect and reverence that I would want to be treated with. And that cow as an individual matters. The cow whose body that belonged to is an end in and of herself. She matters just on her own. And therefore, as an isolated situation, I cannot, in good conscience, consume her body, because it's not how I would want to be treated in her situation. Okay, I'm recording this part over the last part because I think I didn't explain the deontologist idea quite as well for what they might say in response to a Bentham's mugging. They might say that the principle of non-exploitation, non-participation in the exploitation of animals is more important and more powerful than any kind of wager that you might try in the moment. To have the humility to realize that you're not necessarily smarter than the principle of veganism. You can't outsmart that principle. So a deontologist might say the principle itself overrides my decision. There is no decision to be made there because that decision would be breaking my principle. For me, I have a range of choices of what I can do in a day, but abusing an animal or paying for the product of an animal or consuming the product of an animal, those actions do not fall under my spectrum of choices in a given day. They're not available to me because of the overarching principles that I adhere to, okay? In the same way that if you principally will not abuse a human child, there's a range of things you could choose to do in a day, but none of those decisions involve abusing a child, okay? It's the same deal for animals. It's hard to explain this to people who have not yet made the connection. So I use the human comparison to get through to people who have not made the connection yet. So that's more of a deontologist point of view. Let's now introduce a little bit of virtue ethics. Like one of the great Stoic writers, let's say Marcus Aurelius, he's like in the realm of virtue ethics. It's like very early ancient self-help, basically. What is the kind of thing that Marcus Aurelius would say in response to Bentham's mugging? He might say, this dilemma is about the kind of person I want to be, who I want to be. I can't control what you do, but I can control what I do. It's a dichotomy of control here. I can control how I conduct myself in this situation. And I don't want to be someone who benefits from the exploitation of an animal. That's not who I want to be. So I'm going to make a choice that reflects who I aspire to be, which is someone who doesn't abuse animals. And if I ate that burger, I would be undermining myself. I would not be taking a step towards that kind of actualization. I'm putting words in the mouth of Marcus Aurelius, but I'm trying to step into the shoes of just like a pure virtue ethicist. Now, if we go to the utilitarian perspective again, we can see that actually the Bentham that would have been mugged in this situation is a particular type of utilitarian, right? So I'm going to fortify the utilitarian position here because utilitarianism is part of this. A long-term utilitarian, a utilitarian who's thinking with a long time horizon, might see that maintaining a robust stance in the eyes of the public is more important to the well-being of farm animals than what I can do in this singular interaction to fudge the numbers a little bit. Because everything we do in the public eye, every time we interact with someone, it sets a precedent. And that precedent has a ripple effect. It leaves a wake in social behavior. If non-vegans witness me as being a pushover, where a non-vegan can easily run circles around them, get them to do very undignified acts like eat a hamburger, engage in activities that run completely contrary to their values, right, that is going to have massive social implications, which will unfold further down the line. So long term, even from a pure utilitarian point of view, it is not a good idea to eat that burger under a Bentham's mugging situation. So yeah, you tell that non-vegan who is exhibiting a major abusive dad kind of aura, he's really emitting those abusive dad vibes, tell him to go fuck himself. Tell him that won't work. Walk away from the interaction. He's trying to screw with you. He's trying to embarrass you in front of an audience. And veganism seeks to end the exploitation of animals at the hands of mankind. It's not moving you towards that goal by interacting with people like that. So anyway, I wanted to talk about Bentham's mugging here. I think it's a very fun one. And in a later video, I want to talk about Immanuel Kant, because Kant has his own dilemma, which kind of exposes certain things about deontology. And it's very fun as well, and there's big discourse around it. But that will come in a later video. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been informative for you. See you in the next one. Goodbye.
Some of the shocking things I've noticed through my career in the butchering, there's quite a lot of cysts and cancer that come through the supply chain. It's impossible for the abattoirs to remove all these cysts and tumours that come through because it's inside the carcasses, so we have to cut them out. But then a lot of the meat still gets put on the shelf, whether it be pork, chicken, beef. If consumers knew, I think a lot would choose not to eat meat.